Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ali. I'm a junior doctor working in Cambridge, and this is going to be the final video in the WWDC recap series. And in this video, I'm going to be indulging my love of all things Apple by focusing on the funny bits and the banterous bits that were included in it. As usual, there's going to be timestamps in the video description and in a pinned comment, so you can skip around the video if you feel like it, and you can even replay some of your favorite moments of banter. But now, let's just get into it. So the event starts off fairly uneventfully, with our boy Tim talking about tvOS and Apple Music, and then he invites our friend Kevin to the stage to talk about Apple Watch, and this is where we get the first piece of banter from the keynote.
You'll feel a silent taptic on your wrist, and if sound is on, you'll hear an audible chime, like this. Yes, that's a bird song. It's actually a robin captured in Apple Park. It was recorded in Apple Park. The robins are okay. All right.
No, Kevin, mate, I don't know how you do it. That was an absolute corker of a line. That made me burst out laughing when I first heard it. So then Kevin talks a bit more about the Apple Watch, and then we get a fellow medical doctor, Dr. Sumbul Desai, talking about the health features of the Apple Watch.
Hearing loss is often so gradual, it's important to know when the sounds around you are loud enough to impact your hearing. Like when you're in the middle of a construction zone, at a sporting event, or playing your music really loud to drown out your singing voice. I do that all the time.
I mean, yeah, fair play to her. I think that got a few laughs from the audience. I'm actually very jealous of her career. So she started off as a computer science undergraduate, and then after a few years, she went to medical school at Stanford. And then she became the executive director of Stanford Medicine's Center for Digital Health, and then she was snapped up by Apple as their VP of Health. So that's a pretty cool career. Fingers crossed, one day, we'll see. The next piece of attempted banter comes from Haley Allen, who's the watchOS program lead.
Remind Marcus that just because you're almost 7 does not mean you get to, quote, veto your bedtime.
Yeah, fair enough. I got a few chuckles from the parents in the audience who have 7-year-old children. So they talk about the Apple Watch a bit more, and then Tim Cook comes back on stage to introduce Craig, who is everyone's favorite Apple presenter, or Crag, as the Americans would pronounce it.
I'd like to hand it over to Craig. Craig!
Now, when it came to naming this release, our crack marketing team really surprised us this year by demonstrating their ability to count well into the double digits. Yes, it's iOS 13.
So I've been watching the Apple keynotes for the last few years, ever since I became an Apple fanboy, and pretty much everyone on the internet agrees that Craig's presentations within Apple are probably the funniest, and he loves to poke fun at the marketing department and play into those stereotypes. Probably a little bit problematic in 2019, but I think he does it to a good level over here.
And your calendar, your daily events have never looked so awesome on this really beautiful palette.
Oh, classic Craig banter, am I right? Anyway, Craig then introduces the team behind the iOS dark mode feature.
Happy times. They did slowly begin their descent into darkness. We take the details very seriously.
Yeah, that's a pretty good touch, and it seemed like everyone in the audience appreciated that. Then they talk a bit about Apple Maps, which no one cares about, and a few security privacy features that some people care about. And then Craig, thankfully, comes back on stage to talk about messages.
All received messages like this. Like, who is this guy? Well, wouldn't it be better if you could see something like this? Or maybe even this?
So he talks about these new messaging features, and then we get this very weird interlude from two beauty YouTubers that, honestly, I've never heard of before. Probably because I'm not a beauty YouTuber. And they're using the new Memoji feature to talk to each other. It's a little bit weird, and I think everyone in the audience kind of agrees that it's a little bit weird. But then thankfully, Craig comes back on stage and addresses the awkwardness in the room.
So I think that's given us all a great deal to think about.
And then Craig comes back on to talk about iPadOS, and while he's demoing the split screen features, he drops this fantastic line.
So in addition to notes here and pages, I can have 2 Microsoft Word documents side by side. I mean, that's Enterprisey right there. And
so I actually laughed out loud the first time I saw that. And there's a running joke amongst developers/coders about enterprise software, enterprise apps. And enterprise apps are seen as being these like big bloated pieces of software that were made decades ago that enterprises, big companies, pay obscene amounts of money for. And when you hear enterprise software, you tend to think of Microsoft or like Oracle or Salesforce, or these like big companies that are making very, very expensive pieces of software that are used by these massive companies. So here Craig is kind of giving a nod to that culture of making fun of enterprisey stuff by saying that 2 Microsoft Words windows are, oh, that's Enterprisey. And that sounds a lot less funny now that I've tried to explain the joke. I probably didn't even do a very good job of explaining it. But anyway, then they talk about the new Mac Pro and the Pro Display XDR. There's not a lot of banter in those presentations until unintentionally right at the end when the guy announces the price of the stand.
The Visa mounted adapter will be $199 and the Pro stand $999. And like the Mac Pro, they'll all be available in the fall.
So as soon as he announces that the stand is going to cost $1,000, you can hear the outrage in the audience when everyone is kind of like muttering amongst themselves, and then he kind of flounders a little bit in his presentation. I think he might have been expecting some level of applause, but instead he's got these people in the audience being like, what the hell? How on earth can you charge us $1,000 for a monitor stand? Thankfully, the awkwardness about #standgate, I think that's what we should call it, is rescued by Craig again when he comes back on and delivers some chat about iTunes.
Well, now, customers love iTunes and everything it can do. But if there's one thing we hear over and over, it's, can iTunes do even more? I think it can. How about calendar in iTunes? I mean, you could have all of your appointments and your best tracks right in one app. Could we take it further? I think so. How about mail in iTunes? And maybe Safari in iTunes. And how are you going to switch between these apps? Well, of course you'll add a dock. I think we've nailed it. Now,
I thought this segment was pretty great because Craig is poking fun at Apple, at themselves, for how bad iTunes is. Like, it's been a frustration for pretty much anyone using macOS that iTunes is absolutely terrible. It tries to do too many things. It's far too bloated. And it's good that they're not taking themselves too seriously, that they're able to kind of laugh at themselves before, you know, announcing that they're actually going to split it up into 3 different apps, which is met with a round of applause from everyone in the room. Although, in fairness, almost everything they say at this keynote is met with a round of applause. So maybe that's not quite a prognostic factor for how good a feature is.
because now when you plug in your phone, this is what you see. Nothing.
And again, he's doing the classic Craig thing of poking fun at Apple while also announcing a new feature. So then for the next 30 minutes, they talk about changes for developers, so things like Swift and augmented reality. And then for some very odd reason, they invite 2 people who from the Minecraft team to come and demo the augmented reality version of Minecraft, which is very, very weird. And it's all about they're like killing chickens and stuff. And it's a little bit awkward. But then Craig comes back on and tries to add a little joke to the mix.
Yeah. Just to be clear, no chickens were harmed on the stage at WWDC. I know it was very lifelike, but that was an illusion.
I mean, yeah, fair enough. That's an easy shot to take, and it seemed like the people in the audience appreciated it. And finally, they ended the keynote by talking about this new thing called Swift UI, which is a feature for developers that makes it a lot easier to actually build apps.
That's better, but we all know that product marketing chooses these names randomly. So, to get a feel that matches that reality, let's wrap our banner in a custom randomizer component that I built earlier to help us pick a name. And now we're ready to choose the next name for Mac OS. Oh, that one's not great. Let's try one more. Cute animals seems promising. Well, that one's perfect. All right, so because SwiftUI includes built-in support for integrating with other Apple frameworks, I thought it'd be fun to use the new Reality Kit framework to envision the release of macOS 10 Flying Squirrel. And it looks like it's gonna be amazing. And that's a quick look at building user interfaces with SwiftUI and extra previews. You're gonna love it.
So yeah, that obviously goes down really well amongst this audience of developers because it actually is genuinely like an incredible feature that you can do all these new things with SwiftUI. And it's kind of cool how instead of going with like some lame example, they went for a fun example, which you might actually consider to be lame, but you know, I quite enjoyed it. It seemed like people in the audience enjoyed it. Yeah, so that was a highlight reel of Apple's WWDC, focusing on the jokes, the funniness, the banter that was at the event rather than the products themselves. But you know, there's loads of videos on the internet, and I've done one myself where I talk about my top 5 highlights from WWDC, and another one where I talk about my favorite new features coming to iPad OS. Big shout out to Craig Federighi for being the most entertaining Apple presenter as usual. I think maybe over half of the funny bits of this keynote came from him. But I think the joke of the event has to go to the guy Kevin right at the start who made that joke about the robin. And here that is again.
You'll feel a silent taptic on your wrist, and if sound is on, you'll hear an audible chime, like this. Yes, that's a bird song. It's actually a robin captured in Apple Park. It was recorded in Apple Park. The robins are okay. All right.
No. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it vaguely entertaining. I certainly enjoyed making it. While I was watching the keynote, I had this idea that, oh, you know, there's some bits of this that are genuinely quite funny, so why don't I just make a video talking about the funny bits? Because, you know, who wants to just talk about tech all the time? But yeah, from next week, we're going to be returning to our regularly scheduled programming, where I make videos about medicine, tech, education, productivity, that sort of stuff. So more stuff coming soon. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, then please consider doing so. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.